children, it's Grandma Carla, and I am so excited because I rarely have a good chunk of time to read, and today is Friday, and I don't have anything that I have to do until this afternoon, so I am going to read a few stories to you today, and I'm excited to get to do that. And today we're going to read Mr. Putter and Tabby. And this is by Cynthia Rylant and Arthur Howard, and it looks like a cute book. So here we go. Mr. Putter and Tabby see the stars. Here's a picture of Mr. Putter in a hammock. He looks like a nice gentleman, doesn't he? Logs. Mr. Putter and his fine cat, Tabby, loved to sleep. They could sleep anywhere. There's Mr. Putter and Tabby. They slept in chairs, in swings, in cars, in tubs, and sometimes in the laundry room. There's a porch swing and a car and a tub and the laundry room. Mr. Putter and Tabby also slept in a bed. Of course, most of the time, sleeping in a bed was just fine. Mr. Putter plumped his pillow, Tabby squished hers, and then they slept like logs. But one night, one of the logs couldn't sleep. There's Tabby. There they are asleep like two logs. But one night, one of the logs couldn't sleep. I see Tabby. Grumble. Mr. Putter was the log who could not sleep. He could not sleep because he had eaten too many pineapple jelly rolls at Mrs. Teaberry's house. He's holding his tummy. Mrs. Teaberry was Mr. Putter's good friend and neighbor, and she liked to feed him. She liked to feed everybody, but most of all, she liked to feed Mr. Putter. She was always sending her good dog Zeke over to Mr. Putter's house with a note. The note always said, "Are you hungry?" And Mr. Putter always said, "Yes." And so he and Tabby went over next door a lot. There she is cooking. And there's the dog handing Mr. Putter a note. But tonight, Mr. Putter had been having such a good time that he lost track, and he ate 21 jelly rolls. He forgot to count them as he popped them one at a time into his mouth. Before he knew it, 21 jelly rolls were gone, and it was time to go home. I think Mrs. Teaberry must be an amazing cook. He just keeps reaching for those tea berries. And then he went home. Mrs. Teaberry was happy that Mr. Putter enjoyed her jelly rolls so much, but Mr. Putter's stomach was not. It grumbled and grumbled and grumbled. Mr. Putter looked at his nice soft bed when he got home. Grumble, grumbled his stomach. Mr. Putter knew he would not be able to sleep with all that grumbling. What to do? Mr. Putter looked at Tabby, and then he got an idea. There's his stomach. Grumble, grumble, grumble. And Mr. Putter gets an idea. Stars. "Let's go for a walk," Mr. Putter said. He put his coat back on. He put his hat back on. He picked up Tabby, and out the door they went to go for a walk. It was a beautiful night. The moon was full, and moonlight was everywhere. Oh, how pretty a scene that is. Look at Mr. Putter and Tabby looking at all of the neighborhood in the moonlight. Tabby looked. She listened. She twitched her ears. She twitched her tail. She loved the night. Mr. Putter loved it too, even with a grumbling stomach. There's Mr. Putter and Tabby looking all around. Tabby doesn't get out much at night. She likes this. Mr. Putter looked up at the sky. He showed Tabby the stars, and he told her all about them. He told her that the Big Dipper was full of milk from the Milky Way. Tabby purred. She loved milk. Look at the stars in the sky. He told her about looking at stars when he was a boy and how he had always wanted to ride in a rocket ship. He told her how he had always dreamed of adventure. Can you see what it says on that little rocket ship? It says it's the Putter ship. And there's Mr. Putter as a little boy, dreaming of rocket ships. Tabby purred some more. Mr. Putter and Tabby made a nice big circle around the neighborhood. And look at Tabby. She is so happy. So happy to be carried all around the neighborhood at night. They looked at the sky. They looked at the yellow lights of the sky. They looked at the cats sitting in windows, looking back at them. You see all the cats in that window looking at Tabby and Mr. Putter? And when at last they circled back home, they stopped in front of Mrs. T-Berry's house, and Mrs. T-Berry and Zeke were on the front lawn. "Mrs. T-Berry, what are you doing up?" asked Mr. Putter. "Zeke has a grumbling stomach," said Mrs. T-Berry. "He ate too many jelly rolls, and we can't sleep." Okay, so here they are, and here you're talking to Mrs. T-Berry. Mr. Putter and Tabby were delighted. They sat on the lawn with Mrs. T-Berry and Zeke. Mr. Putter's stomach and Zeke's stomach talked to each other, while Mr. Putter and Mrs. T-Berry talked to each other. Their stomachs are still grumbling, but they're having a good time anyway. They told stories in the moonlight. They told secrets, and they made each other laugh. And when the stomachs on the front lawn stopped grumbling, everyone said good night, went to bed, and slept like logs. And there is Mr. Putter and Tabby at Mr. Putter's house. And there is Mrs. T-Berry and her dog Zeke at their house after they had had their whole nice little visit. In the morning, Mr. Putter heard a scratching at the door, and he opened it. It was Zeke with a note, and the note said, "Are you hungry?" There they are. Mr. Putter's opening the door. And there's Zeke with the note. "Are you hungry?" Mr. Putter smiled. He picked up Tabby, and together they walked next door. Looks like he's bringing Mrs. Teaberry some nice flowers. What good friends they are. And they sure do like to eat together. And that is the end of Mr. Putty and Tabby. Mr. Putter and Tabby see the stars. I like these books, and apparently there are more of these, so we'll read some more of those later. This is Grandma Carla, and I love you.